I like to say that I find most of my inspiration in theosophical ideas or the universal ideas that are the basis for theosophy. So I will, as I go along, I will mention certain articles and certain books for those of you who are interested to read more on the topic. It is said that about 1/3 of our life we spend sleeping. And I do not know how it is for you guys, but for me it is pretty much of an oblivion what happens there during those hours, apart from certain glimpses. And so we're going to explore together today, how can we get to know our dreams better? How can we get to know ourselves better? How can we become more visionary in our capacity? And how can we, as an extension of all this, be able to remember previous lives? So this is the way that I've structured this talk today. I'm going to talk a little bit about sleep in general. And then I'm going to mention a little bit about dreams from a Jungian perspective, due to the education I have within this field, working with it in therapeutics. And then I'm going to move into the theosophical and more esoteric aspects of dreams and visions and sleep. And we're going to spend some time on trying to figure out who we are. And I promise you there will not be any answers today. Probably a lot more questions in the best of cases. And then we will move over to how can we practically, what practical advice does theosophy gives in order to develop our visionary capacity. Many times theosophy is viewed as a very kind of intellectual approach to wisdom. But if we dive into the theosophical literature, we actually find a lot of practical everyday advices that we will look into. And then at the end, we will do a small exercise with the eyes, which has a very good capacity for balancing out the nervous system and inducing good sleep. And this is from the Tibetan Ayurvedic system of medicine. The god Hypnos is actually the god of sleep, because Hypnos means sleep. And Hypnos was the son of Nyx, and Nyx is the goddess of night. He was also the brother of Thanatos, who is the god of death. And we will see the close similarity as we come into the theosophical aspect of the teaching, of the ideas, how closely related sleep and death actually are. Now, Hypnos, he lived in the underworld, according to some tales, and to other tales he lived in a cave. And he had many sons, and the dreams were one of his many sons. And Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, rippled through his cave. Dreams are something that have fascinated poets and writers way back in history. And Peter, would you mind reading this from Shakespeare for us?
We are made of the same fabric that our dreams are woven of. Our short lives are embraced by a dream.
Isn't that interesting? You know, the Chinese philosopher Chuang Tzu, he had that beautiful little story about the butterfly sitting on a branch. And he was saying, am I the butterfly dreaming that I'm Chuang Tzu, or am I Chuang Tzu dreaming that I'm a butterfly? So what is dream and what is reality? And we will see that many of our normal ideas of dream and sleep and waking consciousness will be a little bit changed during this talk. Jalaluddin Rumi, are everyone familiar with him?
Mm-hmm.
Someone that isn't?
Yeah.
Okay, Jalaluddin Rumi was a man who lived between 1207 and 1273, and he was regarded as one of the foremost Sufi teachers in the world. He formed the order of the whirling dervishes. And if any one of you have been to Konya in Turkey, there is a mausoleum over him. And I don't know if you have noticed that on a very small tile, ceramic tile on the wall, it says, Rumi, the greatest theosophist of his age.
Wow.
Now, when we say theosophist, or when we say the word theosophy, we have to remember that there are universal ideas. There is absolutely no organization that can say we have monopoly on these ideas. So the word theosophy comes from theos and sophia, which means divine wisdom. And this divine wisdom is within the heart of every one of us. And it has expressed itself during all the ages through different names. So when I use the word theosophy and theosophist, I use it in that context. Can you read that as well, Peter, for us, just to make it clear again?
Though we seem to be sleeping, there is an inner wakefulness that directs the dream, and that will eventually startle us back to the truth of who we are.
And you know how torture, one of the worst tortures that we can be exposed to is deprivation of sleep. Because we will see later on when we get into the theosophical aspect of it that each night we could say that we go back into our own true source and gather strength. And if we wouldn't do that, we wouldn't be able to live this life. How many of you sleep more than 6 hours a night? Sometimes, huh? How many of you remember your dreams when you wake up in the morning? Sometimes, yeah. Okay.
Sometimes, yeah.
How many of you are aware that you're dreaming in your dreams or had that experience?
Sometimes.
So we have a quite advanced group here, right? Well, this is Gustav, as we call him. I don't know what you call him. Garfield. Okay. The perfect sleep. Did you know that an infant sleeps, the average infant sleeps between 17 and 18 hours every night? And the regular, or you say the average for an adult these days is between 6 and 9 hours. Now, only about 50 to 100 years ago, the average for a human adult would be like between 7 and 10 hours. So we see that we sleep less and less. It probably has to do when we come back from work or whatever we do during the day, that we have time, we go out onto the internet, we watch television, we are very active. So we actually get less and less sleep. And just for fun, do you have any clue how much a cat sleeps?
Oh, boy.
Probably the same as a baby.
14 hours on the average. How about the horse? Any wild guess?
3 hours.
3 hours. Perfect. Good guess. And how about the bat? 23 hours. Kind of a record. The bat sleeps for 23 hours out of 24. Huh? So we come down to the crunch and we can ask ourselves the question, do we really follow the rhythm of nature? What happens during sleep? Apart from the occult things that we're going to dive into, what happens? Yes?
Our organs repair themselves.
Our organs repair themselves. There is, for example, a hormone that is often released when we are stressed called cortisol. And cortisol, together with many other hormones, should be at the lowest in the middle of the night. And then gradually we should sort of wake up and be prepared to come into action again. But before the middle of the night used to be around 1 o'clock. But nowadays, for most people, they go to bed a lot later. So the middle of the night comes a lot later. And what it does for the repair of the body is quite dangerous. Because all the repair phases of the body get sort of delayed. And that's why we normally, or most of us, when we wake up in the morning, may feel even more tired than we went to bed. Because the body has been delayed in its process of repairing itself. Now, this is from Indian Ayurvedic system. Is most of you familiar with the Ayurvedic system of medicine? It's the ancient traditional Indian system of healing and medicine, and is one of the few, you could say, complementary or alternative or integrative system of medicines that are recognized by the World Health Organization. And what is so interesting is that they talk about different, you can say, qualities. The vata quality, for example, is a quality of air, it's a quality of movement. Kapha is a quality of more phlegmatic character, more laid back character. And Pitta is a quality of fire. So if we look at 2 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the morning, there is what is called the Vata time. And this is the time where the movement kicks into the body. This is the time where the body cleans out everything that has been sort of storing up in the body. That's when we need to go up and go to the bathroom. It's also the ideal time to do a little bit of gentle exercise, or maybe take a small walk, if we want to live in accordance with the cycles of nature. Then between 6 and 10, we have what is called a kapha time. That is a time that is very good if you want to sit down and concentrate. If you don't want to do meditational studies, or if you want to do things to collect yourself, or just do your studies and preparations for the rest of the day. So between 10 and 2 in the afternoon, or 10 and 14 as we say in Europe, that is the Pitta time. This is the time for the digestive fire in our organism. So this is actually the time where it is most recommended to have one's main meal of the day. And you see that, for example, in Hindu and Buddhist traditions, when you go to retreat, you don't really eat anything after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or you have a small cup of tea or something extremely light in the evening. And then between 2 and 6 in the afternoon, you can have this kind of movement time. The Vata time kicks in again. So it's also a good time for, lighter type of exercises, moving a little bit, a lighter type of evening meal. And then between 6 and 10 in the evening comes the Kapha time. And this is the body's own way to prepare it for sleep and rest again. So this is a time to sit down, to meditate, to read something that is kind of calming, and to maybe listen to some good, nice music that is not too stimulating. And then between 10 and 2 in the evening, or in the night, that's again the Pitta time. But this time is the fire to cleanse things out. So just as in the middle of the day we had a Pitta time to the digestive fire, to assimilation, now we have a Pitta fire in order to get rid of waste. Now, what is so interesting is that modern science, medical science, has looked into these times. And they correlate pretty well with the hormonal cycles of the body. So there is a really ancient wisdom in this. So what is said that if we go to bed and fall asleep later than 10 o'clock at night, what we do is actually we're using our, you could say, capital instead of living on interest rates. So we're using our principal capital. Because of course we are human beings with a free will. We can do anything we like, but it will cost us in the long run. So I don't know if you have it here in the States, but in Sweden we have a saying from many generations back, and they talk about the train of angels. And if you want to go on the train of angels, you have to be in bed by 10 o'clock at night. Now, I don't think it was only to get the kids in bed, but I think it has a deeper meaning than that, actually. And any questions so far? Feel free at any time to jump in and ask questions if you.
How long should a person sleep at night? How many hours? I know you said 6 to 9, but is there, since it sounds like it's a pretty important time.
Yes.
You need more rather than less, huh?
We're going to take the next image and you will have the answers to your questions. Yes, we have another question.
Between 2 and 6 in the morning, you talked about gentle exercise?
Well, maybe not at 2 o'clock. But from 2 to 6, that's where the body is being prepared for movement again. That's where we empty out everything that is waste products. So it's said at the end of this cycle, around 6 o'clock, maybe 6 to 7, it's a good time to make a little gentle exercise.
So you mean like something like a walk or
like a walk, a gentle stretching, like
yoga.
a small yoga stretches or whatever, we choose. So life is a continuous motion, and so is our sleep. And if we sleep between 7 and 8 hours, we will have between 4 and 5 dream cycles. And it is said, to answer your question of how much do we need to sleep, it's said that we need a minimum of 2 dream cycles in order to feel well. We can get by with 2 dream cycles. If we look at the cycle, we have, first of all, a light sleep that lasts approximately 20 minutes. Then we go into deep sleep, which lasts between 15 and 20 minutes. And then we go into what is called the REM sleep. Does everyone know what that means?
Rapid eye movement.
That stands for rapid eye movement sleep. And this is between 5 and 20 minutes. So if we sleep an average of 7 to 8 hours, we will have 4 to 5 of these dream cycles, is what modern science calls them. And they include light sleep for 20 minutes. Then we go into deep sleep, 15 to 20 minutes. And then we go into the REM sleep, or the rapid eye movement sleep, for 5 to 20 minutes. So we see if we add them up, we have approximately an hour. And then they repeat themselves. So if we get 2 cycles where we can reach down to deep sleep and go through these 3 different stages, it is said we can get by with that. Anything less will create a wear and tear of the body and our functions. We also have a part of the brain which is called the reptile brain. So, like all other animals, or most animals at least, we sleep best when the temperature is low. Our temperature also goes down at night. And then the temperature slowly rises and we go out of the reptile brain stage, if you so want, and come back into a more conscious state again. So if you have problems with sleep or sleeping, it is absolutely important to have a very dark room. And let me tell you, in Sweden, where we have the midnight sun, it's very difficult in the summertime because we have 24-hour sun, basically. And then, why the light is so important is because the pineal gland, which we know is an occult organ in itself, is what regulates, so it's part of regulating our sleeping and waking states. So, when we get tired, it's because the pineal gland has started to release a hormone called melatonin. And then it should stop at a certain hour, at the late part of the night, so we start to wake up again. And when we push, as I said before, the time we go to bed forward, then the melatonin will still be in the body when we wake up. And that's why we will feel really tired. And lucky the person who can wake up on its own without having to use an alarm clock. Yes.
Why is what function does the melatonin have on the body? Why does the pineal gland release it?
Well, we will come into this a little bit more later, but the pineal gland, it releases the melatonin because melatonin is what makes us calm down, which makes us go to sleep. And for people who travel a lot, there's some people take melatonin as supplements in order to get over jet lags quicker, right? And I don't know how, here you are quite free with selling melatonin over the counter. In Sweden it's forbidden. Because there hasn't been enough studies how it actually affects the pineal gland in the long run. What happens if we continue to supply the pineal gland with, will it stop producing its own melatonin? I mean, I don't think there's anything harmful in using it every now and then, but one may want to look into different options.
Is homeopathic that
Well, homeopathic remedies is a totally different system of medicine because I don't know how well versed you are in the theosophical literature, but we see that there's a lot of recommendation for homeopathy and in systems. And I don't know it's harder here in the States, but in Germany, England and France, for example, homeopathy is a specialization within like you can become a surgeon after you become an MD, you can become a homeopath. Now today, homeopathy is used a little bit in the allopathic way, because the traditional classical homeopathy that I would personally choose and recommend is based on totally different ideas than the modern version of homeopathy. Keeping that in mind. So what are dreams? What are dreams? Everyone dreams, but we know so little about it. Anyone that has a wild guess? What is a dream? Yes, Bobby, please.
Well, it depends. It's a replay of some of the things that have happened throughout the day, or things that are on the mind, and it may give information in metaphor or simile or some kind of a vision, or it may not. It depends on whether we're worried about something or focused on it so completely that we can't let it go.
Mm-hmm. So basically, dreams are states of consciousness.
That's true. Yes.
Yes, and it's true what Bobby is pointing out here, very important, that there are so many different types of dreams. And we will first look at them a little bit from a Jungian perspective, but then as we move into the theosophical approach, we will see that there are at least 7 types of dreams that we will acquaint ourselves with. The reason I mentioned Carl Jung is because he has been a great inspiration for those of us who work with psychotherapy. Because you know how Freud sort of put a very hard imprint and reduced the human being into the basement. Carl Jung and Roberto Assagioli, for example, who was the father of psychosynthesis, they both were interested to go up to the roof terrace of the human being and look what is out there, to know the whole human being. And Carl Jung himself, he had a lot of out-of-body experiences. He actually had a very strong one where he saw himself leaving his body, not only a couple of feet or meter above his own body, but where he actually sort of felt himself drawn out into space and were able to look at the earth from above. So he has added a lot of spiritual aspects to modern psychology and modern psychotherapy. And the way that I have been taught to use dreams with my clients is that, there are so many different ways of interpreting dreams, but the way I work with them therapeutically is to help a person to see that each aspect of the dream, whether it's a person or situation or an object, is actually a representation of something in that individual, him or herself. So Jung talked about archetypal symbols. And what he said is basically the more focused an individual is in their personality, the personal aspect of our being, the more sort of personal does our symbols become in the dreams. And the more we raise our consciousness to a more universal level, the more universal symbolism will we have in our dreams. So in order to be able to help another person to interpret their dreams, you have to get to know them pretty well before. Because it is not like when you take up a dream book and you say, house stands for this and horse stands for that. Nothing at all of that sort. But it's actually a mirroring back an intrapersonal aspect. And as an individual proceeds on its journey towards a more spiritual awareness, we will also see how those symbols will become different. One of the archetypal symbols that Jung talks about is the traveling in any type of vessel. It could be a boat, it could be a car, it could be more modern things like an airplane. And it often has to do with a process that is going on. It symbolizes the process or the movement aspect in us. And here we can see that the man is standing in the front. He has a good view. He has wind in his sails. And he is also holding what you call that stick, the rudder. what you call that steers up the boat.
Rotilla.
A tiller or yeah.
Rudder.
So it means that it has kind of things set in motion towards a specific goal. Now we have a much more universal symbol, and this symbol has been used throughout ages in the Hermetic philosophy and other philosophies, right? And you have different types of symbolism tied into this. And anyone who has studied, for example, the Secret Doctrine on the topic of symbolism knows that symbols doesn't just mean one thing. One always have to look at the context. Here you could say that it could imply the forces of Kundalini. You have the Ida and Pingala, and you have the Sushumna nerve in the middle. It could also symbolize the Thoracic force in nature. It could symbolize so many different things. It could be the polarity between female and male. There's so many different ways to symbolize it. Symbolic dream, the cross is also such a symbol that has been used throughout the ages. We know that if we look closer to the cross, we can actually see that it's an unfolded cube. And in the chapter in the SD of the Hebdomad, the number 7, the second volume of the Secret Doctrine, we can see how H.P. Blavatsky spends quite a long time to discussing the number 7, and we will come back to that. Now, if you would dream a dream like this, what sense would you make of that dream?
It's time to wake up.
Time to wake up.
You're a prisoner of something.
So we see it's impossible to say without knowing the person who has actually had this dream and symbolized it in a picture, right? Yes, we can.
Could be an infusion.
Could be an infusion as well, yes, it could be. Depending what we have as reference point behind us. So now we dive into the more esoteric view, but before we do that, is there anyone who has any questions or comments on what we have already gone through?
So are you saying that these symbols are our dream language then, and some of them are symbolic and other ones are theosophical?
Well, they're all symbolic, but the symbol could be more personal or it could be more universal.
Mm-hmm.
If we are very identified with the personality, normally it will be a more personal interpretation that we have in our dreams.
And we probably each one have our own set of symbols that
yes.
we relate to.
Yes. And as we become a little bit more aware and we move more towards the universal ideas, we will also see that we start to have different symbols of a more universal character in our dreams. So we
More
can
spiritual, perhaps?
More spiritual in the sense, at least more universal. Mm-hmm. Any other question on what we just... Yes, Peter.
I've noticed that sometimes after a long, hard day at work, I don't go to sleep. I lay down and I just pass out.
Yes.
And I'm out until it's time to get up in the morning, and I don't remember any dream. However, if I'm a little bit more like that schedule you were talking about in those cycles, and I go to sleep aware of my surroundings, then it seems like I'm able to remember dreams more.
Yes.
Any disadvantages to that pass-out sleep?
I don't think so, because probably what it does, or maybe it tells one, is that maybe I have pushed a little bit too hard, maybe I have gone a little bit over my boundaries in work or whatever it is, and then probably it's absolutely necessary to have that blackout. We will see when we dive into different types of dreams that some dreams we rather not remember. Dreams that are due to indigestion or overwork or so may be very chaotic, and it's not necessary that we have an advantage of knowing that dream. So I think that we just have to somehow trust that that if you sort of block out or black out, it's probably because you need it right then. It probably just tells you in case you may want to look into how your days are and maybe make the justification, modification there somehow. Yes, we have Bill, and then we have here, and then we have there.
Why is it after 4 dreams every night, I can scarcely remember even one? And there were days I remember no dreams. But I would like to go back to remembering dreams because that's a part of my existence, so to speak. That's the part of me that tells me who I really am. But that's why I would like to get in touch with that. How can I get more in touch with my dreams?
Yes, and that's what we're going to come to.
Okay.
A little bit later on. It's a very important question, Bill, so can we hold it for a little bit? Then we have
I guess
here.
mine's along the same line. I've found in my own experience that if I want to remember my dreams, I give myself a suggestion as I go to sleep that I'm going to remember. And that helps, I think.
Oh,
You have to
definitely.
be kind of focused and attuned to remembering your dreams. And if you're not, you don't always remember.
That's true, because honestly, if we look at the week that has passed, can any one of you retell everything that you've been through during the last past week? If we cannot make it here, we will not be able to make it on the dream stage. We had a question down there, yes, please.
I just wanted to build on what Peter said. I pass out too.
Yes.
But when I get up and I go back to sleep, I have very clear dreams. Like I could tell you down to details.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it about that rested sleep that makes it so vivid?
Well, we will come to that also a little bit later. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Very important questions. Yes.
Yes, I just, in line with whatever time of sleep, after the long day of work, just sort of crashing literally at 9 o'clock, just can't stay awake, and then waking up maybe about 11 and gradually falling back to sleep. I've noticed that I remember my dreams more as it gets closer to a full moon.
That's very common indeed. Yeah. Huh? So we see how we have a little bit different angles to come into this field of dreams. Huh? But there are different periods, and we will come back to that we can use in order to be able to remember dreams more clearly. But I think that what we need to do first of all is that we have to take a look at who am I? These three basic ideas that we are going to go through now comes from the secret doctrine. They're called the three fundamental propositions. And Blavatsky says in order to understand not only the secret doctrine as a book, but the whole secret teaching of these universal ideas that we call theosophy, there are three basic ideas that is the fundamental for all that, the basis for all that. And it's actually a formula of how things unfold from the unmanifested into manifestation. It can apply to the whole, the universe as a total. It can be applied to the microcosmos or the individual. It can be applied to an idea. It can be applied to thought. It can be applied to any event in our lives. So first when we read them in the SD, they seem to be very abstract and metaphysical. But when we actually take a closer look at them, they are very useful as reminders in everyday life. So the basic idea is that everything that exists is an expression of the one divine life. And in the first idea, we talk about an absolute reality that never changes, that you could say, for lack of a better word, is. It's the isness or the beingness. And that's what we are in our very essence. And then there is a cyclic expression, which we call the relative reality, which we are all familiar with. It's everything that we can perceive is in fact a relative reality, because every form that we can see has a beginning and has an end. It doesn't mean that it's not real while it lasts, but it's called a relative reality in contrast to the absolute reality which never changes. So what it says is that exists within everything there exists a spiritual nucleus. Nothing is excluded. The one life pervades everything. And we will see why this is important, because if we don't have this basis, we will not be able to use our dreams. We will not be able to use many of the experiences we have in our daily life in a way that further our spiritual development. Are there any questions with regard to these basic ideas, or is it crystal clear to everyone? Crystal clear? at least on the theoretical aspect. The biggest challenge for us is to live that reality. So let's go on to the second one. The second basic idea is that there is an inherent law in nature which is called the law of periodicity. And we can see it so clearly if we look anywhere we look, everything moves in cycles. And what you mentioned with you being able to remember your dreams more clearly on a full moon is a result of that cyclic law. So birth and death, day and night, the seasons of the year, everything runs in cycles. And it's kind of self-evident when we look and we see those processes. What we sometimes forget is that our thoughts and our emotions and the biorhythms of the body also moves in cycles. So in order to get to know ourselves, we have to map ourselves down a bit. How do I function on a full moon? If I compare that to when there is no moon or new moon. How do I function in the beginning of the year, of a calendar year, compared to at the end of the year? How do I function on a Monday? And I don't only mean a Monday morning feeling, but if I compare that to Thursday morning, there are different types of hierarchical influences during the different days. And if I want to know myself, I have to sort of take some time to see how is it for me. Any questions with regards to this basic ideas? If not, we will take the next image. It sounds very nice, doesn't it? We as human beings we are eternal, and we are involved in a continuous evolutionary process. And it says that the human being has a free will. Do you agree with that? Give me an argument why it's true that we have a free will.
Well, when we have a decision to make, it's, for myself, it comes from my heart. And if it feels right, then that's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I think people get caught up in their mind and go, oh, well, I should do this. But it always happens when we do something and we go, I should have listened. Because we all have that inner knowing.
Yeah. So the fact that we can make choices is one aspect of the free will. Now, if I would be the devil's advocate, I would say, yes, we may have a free will, but do we really use it? How much do we react out of patterns that we have, and how much do we actually act in the true sense of the word?
There's a lot of conditioning.
It's a lot of conditioning. Yeah? So one can say that in that sense, the free will is there as our true potential and power in us, but we probably have to learn a little bit better how to use it, right? Yes, Bill.
Free will, free choice, the same?
Free will and free choice. Well, if we have a free will, we can say that I can make this or that choice, yes.
If that's the case, we can't always make it because my choice might interfere with what you're doing.
Yes.
And they're no longer free for me. They're no longer free choice.
Mm-hmm. So we see how complicated it gets.
It is a complicated subject.
Yes, and we can also see why we have wars in the world, right? Now, I'd like to ask you first, what is our purpose for being here?
That is a good question.
To learn lessons.
To learn lessons, yes. And, yes.
To become the chalice into which the consciousness of God can manifest.
Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful way of putting it. Huh? But why?
So that God can experience matter through us.
Okay. Oh, and what else? I mean, it's all very good.
We can become whole.
So we can become whole. Yes.
For me, it's like to grow closer and closer to the unity that we really are.
Yes. So we can say that from a theosophical perspective, we are actually highly evolved spiritual beings, each one of us sitting here. And what our task or what our dharma is in this evolutionary process of the earth is to try and raise everything that we come in contact with to a higher level of consciousness. Everything that we meet, is, as an older student once said, is unfinished business, is karmic residues from a previous evolutionary period. So when we come back now, it is our task to deal with that unfinished business in order to raise all consciousness. So what does it have as a practical application? Yes.
Well, I was just going to say that too. I believe that true free will, it might be more on the other side when we plan out what our life is what we're going to do this lifetime, what our lessons are going to be, and that might be the real decision making in free will.
And I would add to that, I think that's the biggest challenge in this lifetime is also how to learn how to use our free will in a way that it will become one and compatible with a one will. To live in harmony with the oneness of life, the unity of life. So we actually have a great task. And Mr. Judge, co-worker with H.P. Blavatsky, says in one of his articles, he has a very famous quote, and please, anyone here who is an older student can probably help me to find where, if someone wants to read further. But he says, in order to realize something, we have to continuously dwell upon it. Wow. So, becoming a disciple, or becoming, in the distant future, an adept, is due to the fact that we dwell upon it, that we live like it, that we realize it from the inside. If we can only manage, and you know how it says in the Voice of Silence, it doesn't matter how many times we stumble. The importance is how many times we get up and try again. So if we can try, even if it is for a fraction of minutes or seconds in our daily life, to live as and act as the self of all, as that one divine self, or as a high spiritual being, then we start to put a little cornerstone in that platform, which will one day, if we are persistent, will be the manifestation of an adept or a human being that has developed all its potential. Who are we really? From a universal and esoteric and theosophical perspective, sometimes we look at a human being from 7 different aspects. And the blue triangle has an I in it, and the I stands for the individuality, and it's a word that comes from individus, which means indivisible. And that is who we truly are. This is the permanent part in us. This is the part which never sleeps, which is always awake. And we have different aspects of this. We have the beingness aspect, we have the I am aspect, the I am which gives us a universal perspective, and we have the I am I, which gives more of the individual perspective. And then we have that part in us that actually we call asleep. And that is the personality. And the P stands for persona. Personality comes from persona, which is a Latin word, which means a mask or a role that we play while we are here incarnated. So our way of viewing life cycle is that we are here over and over again as individualities to make experiences through the personality, and by doing so to help to raise the personality up to a higher, you'd say, level of consciousness. But we all get caught up in this personality, and we begin to identify with our emotions, our desires, or my body. And from that perspective, it's also impossible to remember our dreams, because we will see later when we look at dreams, the higher aspects of dreams are actually living realities for the individuality. It's actually stray memories that we remember in the personality from what the individuality has been doing while the personality is asleep during night.
Sorry, did you say that again?
I don't think I even remember what
Okay, never mind.
Sorry about that, it comes and it goes. So let's look at the cycle of sleep then from an esoteric perspective. why do you think it is that we become tired in the evening? Is it because we have too little life energy? What do you think? Too much? Why do we feel tired in the evening? Or whenever we feel tired, what are the mechanisms?
We work too hard.
We work too hard, yes. Yes, that's true.
Too much light.
So the question was, why is it that we feel tired? What are the mechanisms when we start to become sleepy? Prana is the life energy. And the fact that we have too much prana in the body puts us to sleep. It's kind of a controversial idea. It's kind of upside down. I mean, there's never a lack of prana. We basically swim in it. Or when we swim in it, we probably call it jiva, but in the body it's called prana. But what happens is that our cells in the body works in a kind of mechanism of polarity. So in the morning when we are fresh, the cells are able to absorb prana. And as the day goes by, the cells become saturated, basically, to simplify it. So in the evening or whenever we feel tired, it is because the cells of our body can no longer absorb, or the organs of our bodies cannot any longer absorb and make use of prana. So in order to that polarity to readjust itself again, so there will be a balance in the cells and organs of the body, consciousness has to move into another state. And that's when we sort of fall asleep. Yes, Bill.
Too much prana. Years ago, I was under the impression that prana was the life energy, the life force of air. So if I'm breathing prana, the life force, how do you get too much? I thought it was always a self-regulating aspect of our bodies.
It is a self-regulating process since everything in nature works with cycles. So we are going through, and we will see this in just a moment, we're going through different states of consciousness during a 24-hour cycle. But it's never because of a lack of prana. It is because our body's organ, the organ of our body, cannot absorb prana any longer.
Because it's tired.
Because the polarity has changed. It's saturated with life energy. And we also see that this is also the reason why we finally die, or the body dies, I should say. It's because maybe due to old age, maybe due to disease, maybe due to accident, the cell and organs cannot absorb prana any longer. It doesn't mean that we die. We are the eternal divine consciousness that comes into this body and that leaves it. We cannot make use of this body any longer in that sense. Yes.
So then what mechanism goes into play when we go to sleep in relation to consciousness? Meaning that so there must be a direct relationship between the cells sucking up prana and consciousness.
Absolutely. Very important question. And it is said sometimes, that life energy and the consciousness is two aspects of the same thing. And it says that what we call our personal consciousness, according to the theosophical philosophy, is the collective consciousness of all the cells in our body. That's what makes up the personality, really. But our true consciousness, that whom we really are, is the divine consciousness using this body, right?
So it's the indwelling soul that we're talking about as opposed to the overshadowing.
You could say so, yes. The indwelling soul that identifies with the personality. Yeah. Recapitulate. The dream is another state of consciousness. And the ego, and when we use the word ego with capital E, we mean that individuality that is permanent in us. And due to that polarity shift in the body, which can no longer then absorb prana, we need to move into the next state of consciousness. This is our 24-hour cycle. And this is extremely simplified because we have all subdivisions of this. And here we call the waking state. That is where we are right now. And then every one of us goes through, when the body falls asleep, into an intermediate state called the dreaming state. And this takes place on, you could say, different gradations of the astral plane. Then we also go beyond the dreaming state into what is called the dreamless state. And the dreamless state would in that case be the true state of awakeness, right? That would be the state of the individuality per se. So what we call the dreamless state is the source of our true being, our true identity. And it's here that we gather strength to come back and to live yet another day in this sometimes rather confused reality that we live in. And as I said before, if you deprive someone of sleep, it's the worst torture that you can, put on anyone or expose anyone to, because then they don't get that, you could say, come back into touch with your own being, basically, for lack of better expression. Because here it becomes really interesting. The challenge for us is you have to move from the waking state through the dreaming state up to the dreamless, where the real, our true identity is, where the real source of wisdom is. So far, so good. But then we need to bring down that inspiration through the dreaming state into what we call the waking state. And that's where we have problems. Because the way we live here will create reflections on the astral plane. So, if we do not train ourselves, or have done in the past, it will almost be impossible to draw from that source in a conscious way, right? Because everything will be muddled up through the passage here. How do we do? Any suggestions?
You have to clean the dreaming.
Yes, we have to clean the dreaming set, but how do we do that?
Does it have to be with the subconscious? Is it like cleaning the subconscious?
Let's take the next image. It's a very good question. Yes.
Can't you educate the dreaming state to go into the dreamless one?
Absolutely. It is here, in the what we call waking state, where the change has to take place. It is here that we clear up our mess. Because this here,
What do you mean by mess?
well, all kind of tendency to, how would I say, fragmentation of the mind. Most of our mind is very fragmented. It goes out everywhere. My mind was all over the place, right? And our emotions. And it's all basically triggered by the input that we get from our senses, right?
Well, do you think that sometimes the dreaming state can kind of clean up some of the waking mess?
Yes, it can. They are reciprocal. But if we want to change something, we have to start by changing it here. And when we have changed it here, so we put different impressions in this state, that will start to reflect back to us in waking state. And then it will be, reciprocal thing. But we have to start to clean up the mess in here. Yes, there are many questions. Back there, please.
If you are trying to clean up that, you spend a lot of time in silence and meditation.
We have to, we will see it. I see if I have a picture in there. Just a second. What we have to do is that we have to create a channel. And what is a channel? Well, channel is when we are identified with a perceiver. That is basically our channel. And that is through meditation, it's through living in awareness here and now. We will come to a lot of practical advices in a little bit. Because we need to create a channel so we can go up into the dreamless state, gather the inspiration, the nourishment, and bring it down without it getting distorted. And since we all know how big a challenge it is to stay awake on this plane, in the sense of being aware, so we know it's not something that we do in the weekend course or so. It takes time, but methodically, and if we are assisting in it, we will get results. Because it's like Church says, whatever you choose to dwell upon, that will become the reality of course.
Well, is the dreaming state an area of distortion?
From the higher state.
Not dreamless state.
Well, you see, the dreaming state then, on its own, is divided in very many different levels. And we're going to look at 7 different type of levels in a little while. Yes, we had a question.
I am a little confused on the dreamless state.
Yes.
Are you going to explain that?
The dreamless state is, you could say, a state of consciousness where we are, for lack of a better expression, resting in ourselves, our true selves. We're back to the source as much as we can. So it's also said that it's in this stage that we start, first of all, to get what would you call insights, inspirations of a more universal nature. It's the universal aspect of ourselves.
Would you consider that some sort of like lucid dreaming, or
I would say it's beyond the dreaming.
beyond?
It's true awaken. Yes, Jerome.
In one place, HPP says that the true state is a state of high spiritual consciousness. In that sense, Turiya is a high enough state and pure enough that it really does not need cleaning, does it?
Oh no, Jerome is talking about the Turiya state here, which I haven't really touched upon yet. Because that's sort of a very high spiritual state. You could say that it approaches the states of the Samadhi. So first we have to be able to sort of reach and being able to make use of the dreamless state. Yes, we have there and then there.
And the dreamless state, would that be considered the deep sleep?
I think it would be, from our perspective, I don't really know how to correlate that. But it's definitely approaching that state, yes.
I think it's the dreamless state where you're not even aware of your own ego and your own junk.
You could say it's as close as you can come to the divine source in yourself, if you do not want to go beyond into the Turiya state. Yeah. Yes, you.
Okay, so do you correlate the subplanes in the astral to the level of dreaming? So if you were dreaming in the lower subplanes of the astral, your dreams are going to be muckier and darker, and if you dream at the higher subplanes of the astral, you dream and more spiritual.
Very good point, exactly. Because the more you approach the higher astral, you come into the Akashic level, right? So that's true. Yes, please.
I have this experience where I'm dreaming and then I wake up, but I'm still in that state of dreaming and aware of it.
Yeah.
And I don't really like it. But then someone said, well, that's the way you're supposed to grow spiritually. Is that true? I mean, or is that, where you're aware of your dream activity even when you're in a waking state, still aware of that consciousness?
If I understand you correctly, did you mean that when you are in the dream state that you're aware that you are in the dream state? Was that what you meant? Well, normally that is viewed as the fact that you are aware that you are in the dream state means that the point of identification in yourself is not with the actual experience, but with the perceiver, right? So in that sense, it's a good point. Now we know that there are yogis, there are Mahatmas. You would say that the Mahatma never dreams, because they have a fully awakened consciousness the whole time. So from that point of view, starting to get aware in the dream state that we are dreaming means that we have started to build a platform, which is the perceiving platform in ourselves. But for most of us, and I would say for all of us, we need to start to build that in what we call the waking state here. We come back to what you were saying, there are different states there. And I mean, this is extremely simplified. Because there are as many states of consciousness as there are human beings. And there are just as many sub-states of those consciousness. So what I'm going to talk about now is from Helena Blavatsky's Transactions of the Blavatsky Lodge. She has a section on dreams, and she mentions 7 types of dreams, and she's counting from below, so I will do the same thing here. You heard me say that it's not maybe all the dreams we want to become aware of and remember, we have what she calls the chaotic dreams, and that can be due to bad digestion, it can be due to anxiety, and it can be due to fantasies of some kind or the other. And we can see then how much the waking state consciousness here is actually influencing. So here we have, lots of practical advice. We don't have to eat a very big dinner just before going to bed. We can try and read some literature that calms the mind down, maybe do some meditation. And we can try and nip our fantasies in the bud so they don't get too much, exert their power over us. And we go on to the next type of dream, which we call confused dreams. And confused dreams is what she says that we mix up glimpses from the higher states, the dreamless states, with chaotic astral images. So that's why we have all, the benefit in the world for clearing things up here that will clear up things on the lower astral level, so our dreams will be less confused. And that is what she calls warning dreams. And you've all read in the papers or heard about people who get dreams where they dream about someone else, relative, that they shouldn't take this plane or they shouldn't do this or that. And so they phone the relative and said, please don't go on that plane because I've had this strong dream about you. And then it turns out that they don't take the plane and the plane has an accident or so forth. So warning dreams often has to do, it can of course be for ourselves, but many times it also has to do for people who cannot receive those type of dreams themselves. Someone else that is close to them may dream and have, almost like a prophetic dream, clairvoyant dream. She calls this a retrospective dream. Dreams about past events from a previous life. You dream about you dressed up in totally different clothes in a different life, and maybe a dream that is persistent and comes back. Of course, it's very tricky because how do we know that it's actually our past life that we dream about? Because in the astral light, you have a lot of memories stuck, all the memories, in fact, from everyone that has lived or been on this planet. And it is the same when some people go to regression sessions in order to be able to find out about their previous lives. Well, it's no warranty that it is their own previous lives that they get in touch with. It can be from other people's previous lives. But she seems to be indicating, Blavatsky, that is a possibility, and she classifies it as a specific type of dreams. She also talks about dreams that are being sent by adepts. And dreams, the adepts can influence us to the extent that we are open to it. And when it comes to dreams sent by adepts, it's always to inspire us. But she also mentions that there are black adepts that also want to influence us rather than inspire us to do, evil doings. So the influences can be from both sides, and the best protection we can have against that type of influence is try to live a clean and loving life as well as we can, a life of compassion, because that is truly the best shield for any type of bad influence. And she talks about allegorical dreams. And these, she says, are actually, again, glimpses of realities that the brain has captured, but that are being distorted by our fantasies. So they're often only semi-truths. It's not the whole truth. They are distorted. And then she talks about prophetic dreams. Now, I don't know what prophetic means to you. To me, it doesn't necessarily mean to see into the future. It can do. But foremost of all, it is to be able to perceive things as they really are. And to be able to do this, there has to be quite an identification with a perceiver in us to be clear-sighted. Because just think about it, we have to go above all those different sub-levels of the astral that are muddled up in order to have a clear vision. So, you know how Patanjali in his yoga aphorism talks about true clairvoyance has really nothing to do about seeing the future, but has to do with being able to perceive things as they really are. Because when we perceive, we are so deluded by our five senses. We are deluded by the way we've been brought up. We are deluded by all the skandhas or the qualities that we carry over from previous life, our character. So to be able to see things as they truly are is a very, very high state. Now, you have to correct me on this if I'm wrong, but it's a rumor in Sweden that the foundation of the United States, in that process, quite a few of the founders had this prophetic dream. We know that many of them that were involved with the Freemasons, right? And we know from the Theosophical Mahatmas that that whole process was inspired by the Mahatmas. And we see from the symbology, there's no need to say anything more about it. It speaks for itself. So that would be one way, I guess, of picturing some type of prophetic dream. Yes.
In that prophetic dreams, if you have a dream like that, can it be just like a section of your life so that you get that's what's happening, or that's what was happening?
I think that could be one shade of it. It could be one aspect of it.
Or does it have to be very...
I think what she talks about in prophetic dreams, the way she talks about it, is a very high state. But you know how it is. We don't go from here to the high state. So I guess it starts off with glimpses and aspects of it. And if we nourish it, it will grow. Everything that we decide to focus our attention, our energy on will grow. So now we're going to see a little bit, how to further the development, dream lessons and visionary capacity. Or what were I thinking when I put that down? In theosophical literature, it actually said that our teaching that we get from masters and higher evolved beings actually starts in our dreams. I don't know if anyone would like to comment on that. But we have all all to gain, rather, by trying to clear up the states, because whether it's a master outside ourselves or whether it's our own individuality that tries to come through, which basically are very, very linked together, doesn't really matter. And could you please read that, Peter, so we have some other voice than mine?
Visionary capacity consists of being able to perceive things as they really are. We develop it by gradually and consciously peeling off our personal limitations.
So just to emphasize that it's not so much that we have to add to ourselves as to be able to peel off the obstacles that are in the way and sort of hinders us from seeing what is really there. You know how it says in the voice or the silence, look inside thou art Buddha. And we are this perfected being, but not until we start to live and act as it will it become a reality for us. So now we come down to the nitty-gritty everyday work. What can we do? How can we prepare ourselves? Well, we got good news. For those of you who have heard me talk before, you know that my great passion for the moment is neuroplasticity. The plasticity of the brain. And it's exciting from the point of view that we have discovered, or medical science have discovered, that you can change the very molecular structure of the brain by the way we think, by the way we meditate. And for those of you who are familiar with a book called Destructive Emotions and the Way How to Remedy Them, it's a book by from a conference or a week's gathering with the Dalai Lama and certain scientists. And it's called Daniel Goleman, I believe, who has been able to compile this book. It has some really interesting chapters on how they have done brain scans to see that a long-term meditator actually develop different windings of the brain. So it changes the molecular pattern of the brain. And everything that we know before that, you have X amount of brain cells and if they get damaged, well, tough luck. You can't do anything about it. It's absolutely nonsense. we know that it's renewable to the last breath of our life. And it's really, really great that it really shows that the occult philosophy is a true philosophy. Anyone that come in contact with the theosophies will think that we are book nerds. Huh? We just hang our nose over the books, and if you come into the home of theosophies, they have books. But spiritual studies, already in the early 1900s, Robert Crosby, who was the founder of United Lodge of Theosophies, he claimed that spiritual studies, the studying of these spiritual ideas, universal ideas, will change the molecular structure of the brain. And it changes it in the way that the brain becomes more porous, more perceptible to these ideas. So it will mean that if we start to study these ideas, we will find that ideas similar to that will well up inside ourselves. Now, on a much simpler level, on a physical level, if I buy an orange bike, all of a sudden I will notice everyone else who has an orange bike, right? Because my attention has the perception directed towards the orange field of bikes. So when we start to do spiritual studies, especially if we follow the rhythm of life, so we do it on a cyclic basis. So anyone who can do it at the same hour every day, or at least as soon as one wakes up or just before going to sleep, it definitely makes a difference in the brain. And the brain will be more perceptive to this kind of information. And we will of course see then how that in its turn affects the astral plane. The astral aspect of ourselves will also start to become more porous to that type of ideas. Some mention meditation as one means of doing it, and I would say it's a definite must. If you sit down for meditation, you will soon find out that you sort of travel through the different principles of your body and your astral body and so forth. Because first of all, you may find that the position that you sit in is very uncomfortable. So the physical aspect of yourself starts to speak. And then you finally find a position. You say, okay, I'm getting at it. And then all of a sudden you find yourself that you have all these kind of emotions coming up. And so you move into an astral level, because astral level and emotions are basically the same. Or desires, oh God, I'm so hungry. When is time up? So I can go and eat my porridge or whatever. And then as you go on, you have the thoughts coming of yourself. So what you actually do in meditation is that you move your state through different states of consciousness. And you try to just observe, just try to hold the witness position. Now, normally it's recommended that we do that at a certain hour and that we use the cyclic rhythm of nature in order to reinforce it. Because there are cyclic returns of all the impressions. So if we make it a habit, even if we have, we have a really good meditation session, and then it may go 4 months, 2 years, and it's sort of mediocre, but it sort of carries on due to the imprint we have done when we had a good session. So that's one aspect, but what would life be if we would just sit for, 15 minutes, half an hour? The most important thing, as Mr. Judge points out, is the life meditation. Because what use to us is that if I sit there and meditate, and it's pretty easy, there's nothing disturbing me, and then I walk out of the door, and for the first challenge, I burst into anger or impatience, just going to the traffic here, going up to LA. So the most important thing is the life meditation. And the life meditation, you can see, is the golden yellow thread that runs through all our life. So if I'm an extremely focused businessman, that will be my life meditation. And if I'm focused on something else, that will be my life meditation. So whatever my heart is set upon will be my life meditation. By practicing meditation, I create this channel. Because I do in miniature what I will do eventually during those hours that we fall asleep. And so we understand that this is a long process. It takes lifetimes to achieve it. And when Dalai Lama has been asked why he's meditating 6 to 8 hours a day, He said, I do that in order to die consciously and come back consciously. Because that is what that's the prolongation of it, right? If you drag it out in a bigger perspective, is to be able to not lose one's identity, not here in these states, but not also during the intermediate states between two worlds. And actually we can just point out that for those who wonder about this channel, is the channel between the personality and the individuality. And Mr. Judge has written a very short but very interesting note on what is called Antaskarana, which is this ladder. And this is the path in our literature. We cannot walk this path before we have become the path. Now, Antaskarana has 7 different steps corresponding to our 7 different principles. And the realization or the noeticization, to make the principle noetic, is the purpose of each of these steps. And by noetic, I mean to emphasize the individuality. Each of these states has, again, a dreamless, dreaming, and waking state, at least the 2 lower ones. So that's what I meant. That's why it's important to try and clear it up here. Because daydreaming, when we're drifting away in fantasies, the more we do that, the more tricky the dream state becomes for us. Huh? So we have to kind of come to the dreamless state here. You know, some of these states that we may go through in meditation may be so exciting and so overwhelming that it's very easy to get caught in them and think that it's the spiritual state, where in fact it may be a very low astral level. And also when we start thinking, we know that we're not meditating. Now you can use the thinking process in order to focus. You can have a universal idea that you focus upon, and you keep the focus according to Patanjali's 3 points. Concentration, contemplation, and meditation. And most of the time when we use meditation in our civilized world, it's kind of have an inflation to it, just like enlightenment. Because true meditation is our true state of being. Everything that facilitates that we can learn how to concentrate is a good enough step to begin with. So in this present moment, do you know how difficult it is talking about, as Jerome says, thinking? We're thinking about what we have done or what we're going to do. And before we kind of have aligned ourselves in what we so popularly call now, that is so difficult to do, we cannot really expect to remember what happened in the dreamless state. We have to clear the channel. And preparations for the night. Now this is a very practical part. And it comes again from Mr. Judge, who was a very practically inclined person. And he said that before going to bed at night, we should try and look over the day we have just passed in a retrospective perspective, so we go backwards. It has 2 purposes. It has the purpose of sorting things out, so they don't have to be worked upon on the astral plane. And it also has the purpose of strengthening the witness position in us. Because if you know how easy it is if you try and go and walk your day backwards and something really nice has happened, something really bad has happened, it's really easy to get hooked on that. And the moment you're hooked on it, you lost the exercise. So the exercise is to do it like a neutral witness. Just to go through it. Because this is exactly what we do when we die. Before we die, we have this vision of our whole life. So if we can learn to do this consciously, we can also learn how to die in a more conscious way. H.P. Blavatsky was great when she said that it's all a matter about striking a keynote. Each one of us can strike a keynote for the day. It could be some little sentence from Bhagavad Gita or from The Voice of the Silence, Light on the Path, or any other type of devotional literature that you would like to be, you could say, the note that will carry through the rest of the day. As a reminder of what life is truly about. This is really, really tough. Active listening doesn't have to do with not speaking. Doesn't have to do with waiting until the other person stops talking so I can start to talk. It has to do with quieting the mind to truly listen. Even if you come to a lecture like this and you think, oh God, when is she going to stop? The training can be to keep the focus. It's very tough if you go to a lecture that really sucks. But you can always use it as an exercise of active listening. To stop that chattering mind inside. And this is what will eventually lead to that we will be able to perceive what people think. Because thinking is just talking on another plane, right? Punctuality. Why is punctuality important? Anyone has problem with punctuality? Apart from me?
I have problems waiting on people.
Yes, yes. Punctuality is to hit the mark in time and space. Is to be able to be focused enough to, give enough margin for things to happen and still be on time. Normally we say it's respectless towards someone else if we're not punctual. But I would turn it around and I say it's respectless towards ourselves. And why is that? Yes, Bobby.
I think if you want to lead an orderly life, it's important to be punctual about what you want to do for yourself throughout the day.
Yes. Can be, yes, definitely. Yes, we have in the back there, and then Joanne, and then here.
So it's part of training your mind.
Exactly. It's part of defragmenting the mind, right? Make it focus. Yes, Joanne.
For me, it's important in learning to trust yourself. Because if I say I'm going to do something and I don't do it, there's a part of me now that doesn't feel integrated.
Yeah. So it has to do with trust. It has to do with defragmenting the mind. And it's also respectless towards ourselves, because if we are equal to all other human beings, if we have made a decision to meet someone at some point, it's also disrespectful towards ourselves that we are not there on time. Because the self in one and the self in other ultimately are the same. And then being grateful for 7 things with today. I chose 7 because that's kind of a cool number in theosophy. And you know how the personality, constantly demands things, which is kind of a basic greed, which is based upon a kind of identity of poverty, that we don't have things, we have to grab onto it, we have to get things. Right? Whereas the individuality contributes. And I think that's one of the great shifts when we come to any meeting, any theosophical study class, and shift our perspective from what can I get out of it to what can I contribute with. Because every one of us has something to contribute with. So it's a change from poverty to richness, a change of attitude. And we know that attitude, a change of attitude, makes all the difference, right? Why is it important to respect our biological cycles?
Because we live in form.
We live in form. And more, we are responsible for that form. The form consists of microlives. And if it's something that is clear in theosophical teaching, is that everything is beings within beings within beings. So we are responsible for all the microlives in our body. And the way we think, the way we feel, the way we take care of the body will imprint those microlives, those life atoms. Yes, Jerome.
Is our karma the coagulation of our past karma?
Yes. I think that's very well put, Jerome. Because you have sometimes, some disciplines say, oh, the body is not important. It's the most myopic, the most illusionary part of ourselves. But if we are here, and it's our duty to take care of everything we come in contact with, that also becomes important. It doesn't mean that all focus should be on the body, by no means, but give to Caesar what is Caesar.
It says respect, not worshipping the body.
That's a good way to put it. Did everyone hear that?
Yeah.
Respect for the body, not worshipping it. which here in the City of Angels, we've gone a bit far off the other way. This is what it all boils down to. Everything is an expression of this divine life. And this, if anything, has to be the golden thread in our lives. You know, I said that esoteric knowledge, it comes alive in everyday life. It has to do in order to be able to be transformed into wisdom. And you know how it sometimes talks about the head learning and the heart doctrine, the head doctrine and the heart doctrine. And you could say that the heart doctrine is when the head doctrine has been put into practice. And that is what is applied when they say that ethics are applied metaphysics. That's something to dwell upon. What does it really mean? But when we understand the basic universal ideas, and when we put them into practice, they become the true ethics. A tulku is a Tibetan expression for someone who can reincarnate consciously. And that has the aim to benefit the sentient beings. And now the question, of course, is, can we become tulkus? You think all of us can become tulkus? Without exception. Here we have the same egg. Huh? This is in the larger perspective. This is the life on earth. This is the Kamaloka, which is the, you could say, purifying state that we go through when we leave this body, the consciousness. And then we go into what is called Devachan, or the abode of the gods. These two states are results of this state on earth. So everything that we experience in the after-death states are merely reflections of how we have lived our lives. So there are as many Kamalokas and as many Devachans as there are individuals. And they all have different sub-states. Huh? On this life, we have a lot of desires that we act out, that has to be purified in this state. And the residue will be like karmic seeds or skandhas that we pick up again when we come back into incarnation. In life, we also have a lot of aspirations of a spiritual quality that we cannot fulfill here. We all know we may have the best of intent, and then 2 hours down in the day we have, blown them all due to some stupid thing. But the energy, the aspiration is still there, and that is what consists this type of state. So in Devachan, you could say it's a gestation process, where everything that is the beauty of the personality is being absorbed into the individuality, and then will come back with us as our characteristics, our qualities, our gems. Now a Mahatma doesn't have these states, because they process everything here and now. So that is a perpetual now the whole way through. But for us, we can see how well it corresponds with the waking state, the dreaming state, and the dreamless. So we will have the last picture before the exercise, and the exercise is just a short one. To sum it up, would you please read it, Peter?
To live and act for and as the self of all beings implies at every moment to ask oneself, what can I contribute with right now? To be able to recognize the self in oneself and the self in other as being one and the same, and to live accordingly. The picture is from the Rosicrucians. They used the pelican because the pelican, in one of its mythology, would rip open its own chest to feed its 7 small ones. So you could say in one sense it's a representation of the third logos and the 7 rays that beams out from the third logos, or the God concept and its 7 different powers.
What is 7 rays?
The 7 rays, yes.
Which is the third logos?
The manifested third logos, yes. And you also have the rose here. In some cultures it's been the lily, in some cultures the lotus. And you know how the lotus, it grows with its roots in the mud. And it goes through the water, which symbolizes the different elements of earth, water, air, and then it stretches up above the surface of the water and welcomes the beam of the sun. So you could say it's the 4 elements corresponding to the 4 Rupa planes. And to be able to reach beyond the Rupa planes, that is to reach beyond the quaternary of our lower being or personality, to reach up to the higher aspects of ourselves. Any questions or comments so far? Yes, Jerome.
That last statement has kinship to the Kuan Yin pledge, doesn't it?
It does. So the Kuan Yin pledge is known within Buddhist literature. To take one example, at least the Tibetan Buddhist aspect of it. And it basically says that when we search for truth or illumination, that we don't do it to get out of here, to go into nirvana. But what we do is to be able to offer it at the altar of all humanity, of all sentient beings. And we also vow never to go into nirvana before everyone else has reached the same level. So it's truly an encompassing of both samsara and nirvana. It's beyond both. It sees nirvana and samsara as 2 aspects of the same coin, but encompasses it, both of them, and which is very greatly cherished within Theosophy, as many of you know. The vow of the Bodhisattva, or the Kuan Yin pledge, yes. Are you ready for the exercise? Some of you that have been to my previous lectures already are familiar with it. It comes from the Tibetan Ayurvedic system of medicine. And it's a simple little exercise to do. It's a very good exercise to do to fall asleep, but also, according to their tradition, it's an exercise to induce lucid dreaming. So what one does, I can explain it first, is that when one breathes out, one look to the north, that is, one look up towards the eyebrows. And then when one inhale, one comes back to the middle. So if you lay down, that will be staring straight up into the ceiling, and here it will be staring straight forward. And then the next will be on an exhale to look straight downwards towards your feet, and on the inhale to come back again. And then on the exhale to look up to the left, and then to come the whole way down and look to the right. Everything is on an exhale. Well, here it's on an exhale, and you inhale here, and then you go straight down. And then you take the horizontal lines. So on an exhale, you go to the left, back on the inhale. On the next exhale, you go to the right, and then back again. And then on the next exhale, you go down to the left, come back, inhale, and go straight up in another exhale to the right. And it's said to repeat that 3 times if you can manage to stay awake during it. It's also useful exercise if you feel really stressed. Like Peter, when you come home and you're ready to crash out. This is a good one to do. Because it has a tendency, they say, to equivalize the nervous system. You know how the nervous system is sometimes looked upon the link between the physical body and the astral. So I can see in that sense, if the nervous system, it gets a little bit more equivalized, the transition will be smoother. Do you want to try it, or maybe you will fall asleep?
Are we sitting when we're doing this? We're lying?
I would normally do it when I'm lying down. Because I'm in bed already. I've read my stuff and I have done a little bit of meditation, and now I want to go to sleep. Have my lucid dreams, which happens sometimes and sometimes not. But, for Peter, who comes home from work and who may not want to lay down, or would like to lay down, but maybe shouldn't, you can do it in sitting as well.
What
Yes?
does the number signify?
The order.
Okay.
This is the first, this is the second. third, because you see here, and then all of a sudden to the diagonal.
So can I just review? As you start at the center, you go out, and it's an exhale.
You look up on the exhale, come back, so look straight forward to the inhale. Next exhale, you look down, come back to the and inhale.
So all exhales are out towards the center.
Yes. So in a very symbolic way, it's also emphasized the middle of the wheel, right? You know, a wheel, if you're on the outside of the periphery there, it sort of sways quite a bit. But when you're in the center, it's still. So it reinforces the witness position in that sense. And never ever do it mechanically. This is an awareness exercise. Because we can do all things mechanically and be thinking about other things, and then it's just to throw your energy out the window.
So you're actually moving your head?
No, moving the eyes.
Oh.
The head stands still. The head is like Mount Meru. It doesn't move.
And do we have the eyes open or closed?
Oh, you have to have it. Well, I guess you can do it with the eyes closed, but I would suggest to do it with the eyes open. So please, on an exhale, look up towards your eyebrow. And then as you inhale, come back to the middle point, looking straight forward. And next time you exhale, look down towards your feet without moving your head. And on the inhale, come back to the middle again. And as you exhale the next time, look straight diagonally up to your left. And as you inhale, come back to the middle again. And as you exhale again, look straight in the diagonal down to the right. As you inhale, come back to the middle. And on the next exhale, look straight to the left. And inhale as you come back to the middle. And from the middle on the next exhale, you let your eyes look straight to the right. And as you inhale again, you come back to the middle. At your next exhale, look diagonally down to the left. And inhale as you come back to the middle, and straight a new exhale and go look diagonally up to your right. And then come back to the middle again. How did it feel?
It feels like stretching for your eyes.
Yes, it is. You know, the eyes are hung up on 4 muscles. And we all know that we can do eye exercises to improve our eyesight.
And I think it's actually kind of what they do when you get your eyes checked and they're looking in the mirror.
Yes. And anything that we do correlated with the breath or an integration with the breath has a great impact on the nervous system.
So is this something you could do also if you wake up at 3 in the morning?
Absolutely.
Try the breathing and then that doesn't seem to work.
No, you can try this one. Normally it works well. Also, if you're feeling anxious or, you have a tendency to be stressed, it's also a very good exercise to do.
That 2 a.m. and the thoughts are coming.
Yes. You can't sleep and you have to get up in 2 hours.
And even more stress.
Yes.
And you can't be tired. And
no.
Then you're stressed even more.
Yeah. Well, I will again say thank you to everyone who come here today and contributed to make the Windhorse a possible place to come and get inspired. Thank you.